This is an explainer video for various sentencing analyses that we performed on Furando's 240-month sentence. This video is going to go through three comparative scenarios. The first one, we're going to look just quickly at other sentences imposed under 2S 1.1, then comparing his sentence to what others received under other guidelines for comparative purposes, and then finally looking at other biodiesel RIN sentences to see where his sentence stacked up. So the first is a comparison to other 2S 1.1 sentences. This is a violin chart. What it basically shows is the distribution of sentences. The wider it is down here at the bottom, the more sentences were imposed in those ranges. So you could see that well over the bulk of sentences for this group of offenders was under 100 months. What is this group of offenders? Well, if you look here at the top, what we've identified is everybody. This is covering 2006 through 2018. Everybody sentenced under 2S 1.1, which was Furando's guideline, criminal history 1, no mandatory minimum or consecutive sentence applied, and no 5K. In other words, there was no 5K 1.1 or 5K 1.3 or other government motion for a downward variance. There were a total of 4,894 that met these criteria. So what you can see here, I've identified some of the co-defendants, what their sentences were. You can see they're more or less typical, or actually a little bit on the high side of what one could expect being sentenced under 2S 1.1, regardless of total offense level. Evelyn Pattison received, of course, probation, and you can see what the Duceys received here. This time served sentence of 60 months, that's what I estimate if he was released in the near future. He basically would have served approximately 60 months, or the equivalent of 60 months. Which is rather typical. It's a rather typical sentence for those in this group. This also, a 60-month sentence, was also equivalent to the sentence that was imposed on Carmichael. Carmichael wasn't a co-defendant in Furando's case, but in a related case, and was also sentenced to pay restitution of the exact same amount. This next chart it's a little less sophisticated, but more refined in terms of what we're looking at here. We're basically honing in on a subset. We're going from about 5,000 cases now to only 46. The difference is this total offense level here. So now I've added in one variable where they've had a total offense level. The defendant had to have a total offense level of 38. Total offense level is inclusive of any acceptance of responsibility. And again, so not involving any 5Ks or any cases that had a mandatory minimum or consecutive sentence. So there was only 46 cases that met these criteria. Here again, as a comparison to what the other defendants received, very low compared to what Furando received. And for those that were identical to Furando, in terms of having an offense level 38, his sentence was on the high side. It was higher than 3/4 of the other defendants that were identically situated to him. The top of the box here is the third quartile or 75th percentile, meaning that 75% or 3/4 of these 46 received a sentence of 236.3 months or less. So he received a sentence higher, actually far higher than what the bulk of what most of the defendants received that were identically situated to him. This line here is the median, 174 months, meaning half of the 46 received a sentence greater than 174 months. The other half below. The average was only 164.2 months. So now we're going to compare his 240-month sentence to other guidelines to see to get a sense of how serious a 240-month sentence is. This is comparing the median sentences in criminal history category 1 to some selected guidelines. And I looked at guidelines that were both similar to, like white collar offenses, 2B 1.1, as well as those that weren't that were not similar, so such as violent offenses, which are your 2As. 2A 1.1 is, of course, first-degree murder. 2A 3.1 is sexual abuse, criminal sexual abuse, I believe. At any rate, you can see for some of these violent offenses, and this is kidnapping, his sentence is substantially higher than the medians for those sentences. Is actually higher than the median for child pornography production, which is what this guideline is here. This is not going all the way back to 2006. I only took a sample from the last 5 years that were available on the Commission's interactive source book. I'm taking these from, again, the interactive source book as opposed to doing a deep dive into the data, but the data should be the same. The Commission hasn't updated its source book to include 2018, even though it has released the data file for 2018. At any rate, that's beside the point. And then here, of course, is 2G 2.2, the child pornography receipt and possession guidelines. So we could see his sentence is significantly higher than the medians. For completeness, I also looked at the averages. The averages sometimes can be skewed high or upwards if there's a couple of extremely high sentences out there, and of course there always are these real anomalous ones. But at any rate, even looking at the averages, you could see how high his sentence is relative to some of these others. It's still higher than the average for kidnapping. It's equal to the average for criminal sexual abuse. It's still higher than the average for child pornography production. So it's a very serious, obviously a very serious sentence. And, I also looked at, excuse me on this, I looked at the criminal history categories. What actually I tried to do here was not just look at the guidelines, but the criminal history, try to see what criminal history category would equate to 240 months. So just to give you an example, under 2B 1.1, there were only 7 cases that were in criminal history category 6 as a career offender. Those 7 averaged at 150 months. So his sentence of 240 months is still higher than a career offender sentenced under 2B 1.1. Also here is career offenders under 2D 1.1, your drug trafficking guideline. Almost twice as severe than career offenders sentenced under 2D 1.1. Here, to get close to what the average is for production of child pornography, it's still criminal history category 1, but here for possession and receipt of child pornography, criminal history category 6, there was 48. Their average was only 168 months, and his was higher than a criminal history 6. So it's very serious, very significant. This is more, in short, a 240-month sentence is more than the average imposed on those that commit violent offenses in much higher criminal history categories. And here, your criminal sexual abuse, criminal history category 6, not the career offender, but still criminal history category 6. There were 21. The average sentence was only 240 months. Okay, so finally, a comparison to other biodiesel RIN or RIN cases. This is a scatter plot showing those 31. I was able to identify 31 other biodiesel RIN cases, and what these show is the sentence imposed as well as the amount of restitution if it was reported. So I didn't show these down here, otherwise the chart would get too busy. At any rate, you can see here the highest restitution order ever imposed was for 87 million, but that individual received a sentence almost half as much as what Furando received, only 121 months. And this was Furando's sentence out here. You can see what the Duceys received, substantially less than what Furando received. This is that Carmichael case. It would also be equivalent to a time served sentence if he was released today. So ostensibly, it wouldn't create any unwarranted disparity. if he was only to serve 60 months, or even if it was a little bit more, around 80, 84 months. That certainly would not constitute unwarranted disparity, at least statistically speaking. And of course, here's the Pattison case. So the final the final chart is, I just did a very simple box and whiskers distribution chart of this data here. Rather than doing a scatter plot, it just made it a little bit easier to see. Again, what the box and whiskers shows is the distribution of all those 31 sentences from the 0 months that Pattison received all the way up to 240 months. Furando's sentence is the highest ever imposed in a biodiesel RIN case, by far. You can see that's what this indicates up here. And it's also considered an anomaly, a statistical anomaly, because it is above this upper limit here. This upper limit is a statistical calculation indicating that any values above this upper bound are considered statistical anomalies. So clearly, his sentence is anomalous. And then finally, the median sentence for biodiesel RIN cases is only 72 months, and the average is 75.4 months. So that completes my analysis, and if there's any questions, please contact me. Thank you.